So where we left off last time was we were looking at inchoate offenses, we were looking at attempt, right? And look at all the lovely factors that go into attempt, the different tests that we use to determine if somebody has attempted a crime, right? The most obvious and most common being substantial step. And so have you taken some kind of substantial step in the commission of the crime? If so, we're going to say that you probably have committed an attempt. Now, recall, attempt, if, attempted crime is a crime. But if you, without fear of getting caught, basically abandon what you're doing, right? You rebuke what you're doing, you abandon it. In that case, then we're going to let you off the hook, usually, or at least give you a less harsh penalty. The rationale behind it is we don't want you committing a crime. So like if you start to commit a crime and you go, wow, if I commit this crime, I'm gonna get 5 years in prison, but I've already done the substantial step, I've already gotten this far, I'm gonna get 5 years in prison anyway, well, I might as well commit the crime. Like that would be a very bad rule. So we reward people for like stopping what they're doing. And I mean, that's really attempt, right? It's just looking at the different factors, the different tests. For example purposes, if you come across an attempt, I expect you to discuss each of the different tests that we use for attempt, unless I tell you it's a different jurisdiction, what the jurisdiction follows. So that being said, let's jump into the second part of inchoate offenses, conspiracy, Rico, solicitation. So, conspiracy is in and of itself a crime. Right, so whereas attempt requires like substantial step and things along those lines, and you can be charged with attempted murder, you can also be charged with a separate offense, conspiracy to commit murder, right? Or conspiracy to commit a crime. And all a conspiracy is just the agreement of one or more people to commit a crime. Right? So you and your best friend say, hey, you know what? We're going to rob the liquor store. Let's say that you never do. You never get a gun, everything like that. But you do something, and again, if depending on the state, you have to have an overt act. Sometimes you don't have to have an overt act. But let's say that you and your best friend decide that you're going to rob a liquor store. You agree to it. You're like, yeah, we're going to do it on this date at this time. You bring this, I'll bring this. And then, like, let's just say you're both like stoners and you just fucking forget. But your roommate overheard the conversation. The fact that you two agreed to commit a crime is conspiracy, right? It is a crime in and of itself to agree to commit a crime. So even though you haven't maybe even done an attempt, the fact that you agree to commit the crime, depending on the state, is conspiracy to commit robbery, conspiracy to commit burglary, whatever you're doing. Now, conspiracy is fun because it also includes unspoken understandings, right? Which, that's what we absolutely love in the law, is when we're just like, you want to commit a crime, and somebody just nods their head or kind of like does a, okay. Or let's say that you and your partner in crime have committed several crimes before, right? Like, it's just what you do. You are, let's say that you're serial arsonists. Now, it's really weird to have two arsonists working together because, like, if there's a really strong sexual component to this, usually like, the arsonist masturbates while they watch the house burn down or whatever it is. Like, it's real fucking gross. But let's say there's two of you and you're just, I'm not going to judge your personal lifestyle. You do your own thing. You do you. Like, I will judge the crime, but beyond that is what it is. But you and your partner have this routine that every Friday you go downtown and you burn down a building. Every Friday. And really, the first time it happened, it just happened, right? Second time, it kind of just happened. There was no real spoken like, let's do it on Fridays. And then the third time, it was like you were prepared for Friday. That's an unspoken understanding. Right? The rationale is, did I need to tell you, do we need to say, hey, you and I, this Friday, downtown, burning down a club, let's do it? No, because we already knew, right? We worked together. We know that based on our pattern of behavior, we're going to burn down the club or we're going to burn down the building every Friday. So it can be unspoken. It can be this kind of, it's something you've done, it's a pattern of behavior, which again, if we get into a legal context, is really hard to prove. The rules of evidence, when we're talking about patterns of behavior, not exactly favorable to that argument. Arguments can be made, but they're not the most favorable to that argument. So we'd like it if people verbalize, articulate, and especially if they're dumb enough, write down their agreement to commit a crime. So let's look at the elements of conspiracy, because again, conspiracy is a crime in and of itself. So conspiracy has an actus reus, a mens rea, and then any intent circumstances required by the statute. So the actus reus, fairly easy. An agreement to commit a crime. That's it. However, some states also require that you take some overt act towards carrying out the agreement, no matter how small or how insignificant. Right? So in these states, things can get a little dicey in terms of how we charge somebody. Right? Because let's say that you and I agree to go murder Joe, right? We come to an agreement and say, hey, you want to murder Joe? Yeah, I want to murder Joe. I do too. Let's murder Joe. We come to an agreement. That's enough for most states for the actus reus. Some states also say that we have to do something in furtherance of that agreement, right? So that could be, I don't own a gun, but I find a gun catalog, like while I'm waiting for my tires to get changed, and I take it home with me. That's a very insignificant minor act, but it is, no matter how small or insignificant it is, it's an act of trying to carry out the offense, right? Because I want to shoot Joe, so I took the gun magazine home. I have met the actus reus in the few states that require that. Like I said, most states, it's just going to be, we agree to commit a crime, right? So you and I agree to kill Joe. That's the actus reus. That's been met, right? It's not hard to meet the actus reus of conspiracy. It's very, very easy to meet the actus reus of conspiracy. What gets a little bit more dicey is the mens rea, right? So the mens rea, we have an or here. So the mens rea is either specific intent, so not general intent to commit a crime, but specific intent, right? So generally this is going to be purposefully or knowingly to commit a crime. So like we want to, we're not joking around. We're not like, hey, can we kill Joe? Yeah, I want to kill Joe. No, it's, can we kill Joe? Yeah, I want to kill Joe. All right, you've met the actus reus, right? You've made the agreement. And you have the mens rea, like you are making the agreement with a specific purpose, the specific intent to commit the crime. Okay? So again, this precludes joking, this precludes a lot of things. And this is where things get really dicey in terms of trying to prove conspiracy, right? Is did you really, when you're having that conversation, was it your specific intent, was it your purposefully or knowingly, usually it wasn't your purpose, to agree to commit any offense, and like you wanted to commit that offense. Now, other states say that you need specific intent, again, purposely or knowingly, usually purposely, to commit a legal act by illegal means. Think about that for a second. You can do something legal via illegal means, an illegal way. That one always baffles me. Because if it's legal to do, like, why? Right? It's just, it is what it is. So, okay, this is going to get gross, it's going to get dicey, and I'm sorry. Let's say that you want to have a kid, right? That is perfectly legal. Your wife, let's say you're married to your man, you're married to a woman, your wife wants to have a kid as well, perfectly legal. However, wife's not feeling it that night. Husband is. Husband rapes his wife, which up until about 10 years ago in the state of Missouri, you could not do. You couldn't rape your own wife. Like, they were required to have sex with you. That was like 10 years ago. Holy shit. And that's still the rule in some states. Like, yay to the South. But you can rape your spouse, so you rape your spouse. In the process, you get your spouse pregnant. Having the kid, having pregnancy, perfectly legal. The way you went about it, very illegal, right? And so that's where the mens rea come in and this kind of specific intent that, yes, we're doing a legal act. We've agreed to commit some kind of crime. It is a legal act, but we have the specific intent to commit it via illegal means. And then again, any attendant circumstances that are required. Now, I'll say this, conspiracy mens rea is not clearly defined by legislatures, and courts differ on the meaning, right? It's kind of a touchy-feely sort of, like, does this feel like conspiracy? If it feels like it, then they'll probably charge it. Now, I will point out one thing here. Conspiracy and attempt can go hand in hand, right? And they can overlap significantly. Right, so consider the actus reus, we have an agreement to commit a crime. Right? Or we use some states say, in addition, we have to have some overt act towards carrying out the agreement. Well, let's just stop there, not regarding the how small it is, right? Well, if I use a substantial step test, right, and I go acquire something that I have to commit the crime, I've committed a substantial step. Right? I've done a substantial step. So in those states, I've committed the attempt for the crime. But I've also conspired to commit the crime. Right? Assuming that I talked to somebody else about it, we agreed to it, and then I go, let's say, purchase the gun. As soon as I purchase the gun, it fulfills the requirements not only of attempt, but also of conspiracy. Right, so let's say you never actually go rob Joe or kill Joe or whatever you're going to do to Joe, but you go out and buy the gun after you agree with a friend to kill him. You go out and buy the gun. It's attempted murder and it's conspiracy to commit murder. Right? Now let's say that you back out, but you renounce everything you did. We might be able to get you out of the attempt charge, but that conspiracy charge is going to stick. Right? Because did you conspire? Yeah, you did. Now, is conspiracy, okay, so you obviously have the completed offense being the most severe thing. You have below it the attempt to commit the offense being the second most severe thing that you can do. And then conspiracy is the least severe thing that you can do in committing a crime. So we're talking minor punishments here. We don't need necessarily a way to dissuade you, and because it's usually pretty possible. And it's very rare that we just charge conspiracy by itself, right? Because just you agreeing to something, like most people that never sees the light of day. So it's really weird to see it by itself, but it does happen from time to time. So yeah, just keep in mind that, again, if you were in exam purposes and you have a conspiracy issue, you're going to talk about the actus reus. You're going to say, in most states, it's agreement to commit the crime. Do we have an agreement here? Yes or no? Some states require that there's also some overt act, no matter how small. Did that happen here? Yes or no? There's the mens rea. Are we talking about committing a crime? Or are we talking about committing a legal act by illegal means? Or was there specific intent? And if there's a statute, is anything required by statute? And you go through, and again, even if you come to a no on one of the key elements, keep going and say, but if a court held yes, then next we would look at mens rea. And mens rea is this, right? So you want to finish out, always finish out to the very end any possible scenario that involves a charging decision when it comes to crime. So let's talk about parties to conspiracies. So most states have adopted a unilateral approach to conspiracy parties, in which not all of the co-conspirators have to agree or even know about the other co-conspirators. Think about that for a second. Let your head not explode. I can be charged with conspiracy to traffic in drugs. Let's say I'm just a low-level drug dealer, right? And I get it through another person, who gets it through another person, who gets it through a person, who gets it through a cartel, who traces it back to Colombia, all that way down. Right, but I'm just a low-level street drug dealer. Theoretically, especially when we have Rico, I can be charged with any agreements that any of the other co-conspirators, that I may not even know their names, I may not even know they exist, they agree to it, and it's in the chain, I can be charged with it. So I don't even have to make the affirmative agreement to commit the crime. Now, when we talk about large-scale conspiracies, most conspiracies are just going to be one or two people. Kind of the not necessarily the most common, but the best known conspiracy is conspiracy to commit murder whenever you decide to hire a hitman to kill your significant other, right? It turns out the hitman was an undercover cop or something like that. That's conspiracy to commit murder. All right, that makes sense, right? You know who your co-conspirator is, well, you think you know who your co-conspirator is, but there's only really two parties. Where things get fun is large-scale conspiracies. So there's two types of large-scale conspiracies. And so we have wheel conspiracies and chain conspiracies. Right? And when we're talking about a wheel conspiracy, wheel conspiracy is basically where one or more defendant participates in every transaction, the hub of the wheel, and others only participate in one transaction, the spokes of the wheel. So let's say it's something like this. We have the hub of the wheel, we have the kingpin, right? And the kingpin wants to cut out the middleman, doesn't want to have to go through like third or fourth parties to get the drugs to the streets. So the kingpin sells directly to the low-level street dealers, right? So you have street dealer A, street dealer B, street dealer C, street dealer D, street dealer E, and you kind of see it looks like a wheel, right? Now, what's great about wheel conspiracies is, let's say there's a drug kingpin and the importer. And they make an agreement, right? And so A and the importer make this agreement to sell drugs. All right, so they make this nice agreement. The importer and the kingpin, they're all saying, A, you're to sell the drugs, but let's say they also have agreements with E, B, C, and D to sell the drugs. And what you know, D gets arrested. In a wheel conspiracy, even though D does not know about C, B, A, or E, right, because they don't have any transactions with them, because they're in the wheel, I can charge, let's say, D with possession, with intent. I can charge D with conspiracy to C. I can charge D with conspiracy to D. I can charge D with conspiracy to A. And I can charge D with conspiracy to B, E. All separate charges. Low-level drug dealer. Suddenly, this drug dealer, I'm going to charge all of this. Why am I going to charge all of this? Because who am I after? I'm after the center of that wheel. But if I charge you with possession with intent, conspiracy to commit with C, conspiracy to commit with B, conspiracy to commit with A, conspiracy to commit with B, even though you didn't agree with them, you didn't know they existed, they were part of the wheel, is what it is, we can charge you. I'm going to charge you everything that I possibly can. And the idea is it's going to freak you out. Because I'm like, all right, possession with intent, like, not really that serious of a crime, depending on what the thing is. Definitely more serious than just like simple possession, but possession with intent, you know, a couple years. Conspiracy, 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 conspiracy. Those years start to add up, and now I'm like, oh, I'm going from a couple of years, now I'm looking at 50 years. Or I can turn on the kingpin and be like, yep, I agree with this guy. This is who I talked to. Yep, him, and then him. And let's say, okay, we'll drop all the conspiracy charges. So we just leave you with the intent, the possession with intent. So that's how wheel conspiracies work, right? Every transaction is a spoke. But you can be charged with everything everybody does. What's actually going to end up happening is if, let's say, we can charge you a possession, and we charge D with possession of intent. We charge them with conspiracy with C, conspiracy with B, conspiracy with A, conspiracy with E. Guess what we're also going to do? We're going to charge A, or we're going to charge C with D, with B, with A, with E. Right? We're going to charge B with C, with D, with A, with E, and so on and so forth. So we're going to charge all of them with as much as we can. The idea being is that one of the spokes in the wheel flips. We can get one of them to flip, like scare them enough to tell them who was the importer or who the kingpin was, whoever he made the agreement with. Where are they? Who are they? We testify against them. The more people we charge, and the more charges we throw at them, the more likely it is that they are going to flip. Right? So that's a wheel conspiracy. not overly complicated. It's just each spoke of the wheel represents one transaction. On the other hand, we have lovely chain conspiracies, which participants at one end of the chain may know nothing of those at the other end. But every participant handles some commodity at different points. Right? So think of it this way. All right, let's talk cocaine, right? So cocaine comes from a plant. So let's say we have the farmer, right, who is making the plant. Then, from the farmer, we go to basically the manufacturer that boils it down, right? It takes the plant and it turns it into the powder. From the manufacturer, we might have the lieutenant who oversees distribution, might have the importer, might have the regional distributor, and then we have the local distributor. And we have the person who ultimately buys it and possesses it, right? So we go from, and this is all underneath the kingpin. Right, so they oversee the whole thing, but it's a chain, right? The farmer to the manufacturer, to the lieutenant in charge of distribution, to the importer, the regional distributor, to the local distributor, to the person who possesses it. You go buy pot from somebody, you go buy Coke from somebody, you may have absolutely no clue, like you know that like you're getting it from your local drug dealer. And that might be as far as you think, right? But in reality, you have all these people in this chain that you have no clue who the fuck they are. You don't know they exist, like you don't even know like the economics of how drugs work, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to try to break this chain as late in the chain as possible, right? Because that's going to give us kind of the higher ups, right? Like the more and more important people. So if I bust somebody for possession, I'm going to say, I'll get rid of the possession charge if you tell me who the distributor is, like the local drug dealer, right? So then I go bust the local drug dealer. I say, I'll get rid of the distribution charge if you tell me who the regional is, and so on and so forth. Then we get up to the top of the chain, ultimately up to the kingpin, and that's the arrest we really want to make. However, let's say I'm in simple possession, right? Rico is going to make this a lot more fun because it gets worse. So I'm just the person who is possessing the drugs. And the police have figured out the links of the chain, right? But they want to make an arrest or something like that. Everything that let's say it's possession of coke, right? Everything that anybody has done to get me the cocaine, I can be charged with as conspiracy. So if we label like the farmer as A, manufacturer B, lieutenant C, importer D, regional distributor E, local distributor F, and possessor E, E will be charged with A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? Even though, again, we have this one long transaction. We don't have just like a very localized transaction with one person. I can be charged with conspiracy, even to get possession or to manufacture cocaine. I can be charged with conspiracy with the farmer back in Colombia. I can be charged with anything that in that chain to get me that commodity, that drug, I can be charged with. Now, normally we're not going to go after the possessor, right? We're going to hit the local dealer and we're going to see if they can return it. Because they're going to have better connections. They're going to, I mean, drug dealers, if they're any good, if they're local drug dealers, they're going to be very secretive about who they are, their personality, they might give you false names, whatever. So generally, we're not going to worry about the possessor, but we're going to try to hit F, we're going to the local distributor, and try to work our way backwards. But we can charge everybody in that chain, even though, let's say, F doesn't know that there's a manufacturer, there's a farmer, or anything like that. We can still charge F with conspiracy to distribute drugs with A. You know, they never met, they never talked, they never agreed, but because they are part of the chain, they're part of the conspiracy. Right? So those are the really two large-scale ones that we see. That being said, somebody tell me what happens in Griffin v. Gibson. What do we have going on? Yes, ma'am.
Well, the basic overview was someone, his name was Nate, was kicking Nora off the property that they lived on.
Okay.
And
so Nate's kicking Nora off the property.
And she lives with Destiny Doe, the person that was being shot at in the end.
So she lives with the lady named Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Destiny's being shot at?
That's no way. That just came out. They live on the residence together. And
So we have who living together?
Nora and Joe and Nate. They all live on the same residence.
Nora, and Nate. They all live together.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm repeating everything you say so that
Yeah. And then Nate was kicking Nora off.
So Nate's kicking Nora out of the house. They all live together, but he's kicking her out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Nora had a fight with Nate at that time when they were talking about it.
So the fight ensues. Okay.
And there's two different sides to the story that come out in the end.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that we get introduced into the beginning of the case, Joe dropped Nora off at a gas station when she got that call from Nate telling her that Nora was no longer allowed to live on the residency with them.
So she just kind of, so Joe just kind of like abandoned
Basically.
Nora at the gas station.
Yes.
So she can't go home because Nate said no.
And there's this they're all part of a gang group called the 29th Street Crips.
29th Street Crips, so they're all part of the 29th Street, yeah, Crips.
Except for Doe. She's the only one that's not.
Except for Doe. Okay. Don't they have really cool nicknames?
Yeah.
Like just ridiculous nicknames?
Like Smash is Tyler, Zachary Tyler, Baby Attitude is Griffin.
I think that's the one I like, is Baby Attitude. Like, it makes me laugh.
They all have like similar names. So like if they're like a girl, they're like Lady Smash, and then like
Yeah.
it just changes based on the gender, which is weird. But anyways, the gang heard about Nora getting kicked off the residence and wasn't very happy with Nate.
So the 29th Street Crips, she belongs with them. They find out she's getting kicked off the property, and they get pissed at Nate.
Yes.
Okay.
So they go to Nate's residence.
So they go to Nate's residence where Nora had lived before.
Yes. And Doe's made it back to the house without Nora.
Okay, so Doe's at the house. Is Nate at the house?
No. Nate left.
Nate left. Okay, so Doe's in this house.
He heard the gang was pissed.
He heard the gang was pissed, he fled.
Yes.
Okay.
And then Nora was not there either. Doe was sleeping and then heard like knocking on the window and people inside the house. But I guess then It said that she didn't think anything of it and like went back to bed.
Yeah, because, when I hear people walking around my house banging on my window, I go, meh, and go back to sleep. Okay, so go to sleep.
Then the gang, it was like Tyler and a few other members, and Griffin was involved in the situation. Went to the house and basically broke in, ransacked the house, and found Doe sleeping. And they tied her up in the living room.
So break in, get Doe, obviously, tie up Doe in the living room,
And steal a bunch of stuff.
steal a bunch of stuff, ransack the place, like, they're pissed.
And so then they ended up leaving in 2 different cars.
So they leave 2 different cars.
And then,
Did they take Doe with them?
yes,
They
Doe
take Doe.
went with Tyler.
Doe goes with the guy named Tyler.
Yes.
Okay.
And Tyler was telling Doe that now she was part of the mob life and the gang life because she was a part of this whole situation and Nate's issues and.
So basically Tyler's like, oh, now you're in the gang and you're subject to gang justice.
Yes.
Okay.
And so she was taken with them, and then Doe was taken back to, I believe it's Tyler's mom's house, but
Yeah, so
Very
Doe's taken back to
confusing.
Tyler's mom's house, yep.
where she ended up seeing Nor, and she was asked to perform many different acts on each of the members. So basically, she was subject to them and like couldn't.
So basically, like, Doe, they take her back to the house and they sexually assault her.
Yeah, took advantage of her and
Like, I mean, like, it is
everything.
quite literally, like, gang rape.
Yes.
Okay.
And then they basically said they brought her there so she couldn't tell what they did. And, did all this to her, so she was basically like in debt to them.
Mhm.
And couldn't tell them what happened. So after that, they left the house again, and they brought Doe to an empty field.
Okay, so after they sexually assault her, they take Doe into a car. Is Tyler in the car?
Yeah, Tyler and then Griffin and Kid.
Tyler, Griffin, and Kitten. This is Griffin v. Gibson, so obviously Griffin is going to be the key here.
Yeah.
Right, they're in the car with Doe. They take her. Where do they take her?
To an empty field.
Take her to an empty field.
To start walking.
And then, there's like walk,
Basically.
right?
And it said Kid and Griffin had handguns. So
Kid and Griffin have handguns.
what ended up happening was when Doe was walking, they just took shots out into the open and basically at her to try and kill her.
So they're trying to shoot at
they're
her.
making a game out of it, basically who can shoot her.
Who can hit her, right?
Yeah.
So like they say walk, and then they start shooting at her, see who they get, like who hits her, like making it a game, like really, really screwed up stuff.
Yeah, and then she ended up getting hit in the shoulder. It didn't say by who. It just said she was shot in the shoulder.
Okay, she was shot in the shoulder.
And she ended up making it to a man's house that was on like near the property she was brought to, and told her that the 29th Street Crips shot her.
So she gets to basically it's like the farmer's house. It's like, hey, I just got shot by the 29th Street Crips.
And then he called the police.
And he calls the police. I'm
Um,
sure he was like, oh, that's good news.
yeah. Then later on, Tyler was found in a hotel room with a handgun, and then Griffin was found about 3 weeks later with a handgun, him and Kid.
And so they find them, and they all have handguns.
That
Right?
were shooting in the incident. So then they were all charged with robbery, burglary, and kidnapping, and then conspiracy and attempted murder.
Okay. So they're charged with robbery, burglary, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit what crime?
Murder.
To commit murder, and then attempted murder, right? All right, perfect. So what's the issue here? What's going on? Seems pretty clear. They agreed.
I think the issue was whether everyone knew about it, or
You want to help her out?
Whether Griffin should have been charged and convicted of the conspiracy to murder, whether there was sufficient evidence that
Yes.
he was involved in the conspiracy to murder.
So whether there was sufficient evidence that Griffin was involved in the murder, or to convict him of the attempted murder or conspiracy to murder itself. Now, if I recall right, doesn't Griffin claim like he doesn't get out of the car?
I think so. He claims he didn't, and specifically the conspiracy to murder was to murder Nate.
Conspiracy was to
not
murder Nate.
her.
Right, so like when they go, that was their whole plan was to kill Nate.
But
not
they
her.
didn't find him and then took her.
Okay. And so, what does the court say? Is there enough evidence to convict Griffin on the conspiracy? There is. Why?
So they said that the actions of the group and Griffin were sufficient to charge him with it, and that the evidence showed that him and his associates were a member of the gang, and that through the group's actions, they had all reached an agreement to murder Joe or Nate.
Right. So this is kind of where we have, we're not sure if it is an explicit agreement or just kind of implicit, like, oh, they did what? Okay, we're gonna kill them, right? Or yeah, I mean, or it's just like, they did what? Get in the cars. But it's enough, right? And the idea here is, look, they're in a gang, right? You've chosen to associate with these people, and then you chose, which is not necessarily free will, because are you going to tell gang members no, like, I'm not going to go with you to kill this guy? Like, no, you got to stick with your gang, right? So you chose to associate with them, and what they do as a group, you are a member of the group. So whatever the group does, we can charge you with. Yes.
So if we were in a state, I don't know, I forgot what state this was, that had like the furtherance of an act, like any smaller or whatever, would they say that like your choosing to be in the gang would be the furtherance of an act to like for conspiracy?
So
Is that what they're trying to get at?
So the act would have to occur after the agreement.
Okay, so it would be like their acts afterwards, so like the burglary and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it would be, the smallest thing would be, once we kind of all know what we're going to do, even if we don't say that we're going to kill a guy, but like we all know we're going to, the fact that you walk to the car, that's enough for conspiracy, that's enough for an act. All right, so remember, anything however small, we don't have to go to the burglary, whatever, the smallest thing in furtherance of that act, that's enough. Okay? And so this is a California case. That's from the Eastern District of California. 2015 case. Yeah, it's this idea that if you belong to a group and the group decides to do something and you go along with it, you can get charged with everything that everyone in that group does. Right? Or at least conspiracy with everything that that group does. So it's an interesting case, right? It's a convoluted one at best. That being said, if we think about conspiracy, conspiracy really is a last-ditch effort for prosecutors. And it's also controversial, right? And it's controversial because of what we see in Griffin v. Gibson. Not so much controversial about like street gangs, because, you know, like, fuck you, you're in a gang. Like, I understand that most times you don't have a choice, right? It's part of life, it's part of survival, blah, 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 blah. I get it. But like, you're still in a gang. Okay, that's a problem. But what we have problems with, we're talking about conspiracies, is we're talking about, we're worried that if we can charge somebody just because of their group membership, right, and like participation in group activities, and or at least presence during a group meeting is enough for conspiracy, we're going to chill labor organizations, the labor unions, right? If they all gather together and they start talking and they decide to do something just because you belong to, let's say, the Air Traffic Controllers Association, right? Air traffic controllers are not allowed to go on strike under federal law. So they say, screw it, we're going to go on strike. The fact that you belong to them and that you didn't be like, nope, I quit, I'm done, no, you can charge with a conspiracy, right? We're also worried it's going to deal with civil liberty groups, right? So this is not just like left-leaning groups. One thing that always gets me is when people say like ACLU is a liberal group. I'm like, no, the ACLU actually advocated for Nazis to be able to hold parades. Like, they are literally like anybody who constitutional rights are changed or infringed upon, they'll fight for. So like something like the ACLU, like I belong to the ACLU. If we have a meeting and like we decide to go do something illegal, my simple membership and my being there is probably enough for conspiracy, right? And the same is true is actually kind of what we're seeing with the Capitol attack, right? The insurrection at the Capitol building, with that group called the Proud Boys, right? So they are a group. They have membership. You could call them a civil liberties group. Like I think that's how they identify themselves. Not necessarily the militia. They might be, but regardless, they're a group. They identify themselves as a group. Conspiracy comes into play here is, right, like, did you know what they were going to do? And you belong to them. And were you at least somewhat aware or do something that might have helped them? If you did, you're a part of conspiracy, right? Just simple agreement is enough, at least on the federal level. Simple agreement is enough. So you're a member, you knew what they were going to do, that's you agreeing, right? So that's why they're getting a lot of people who maybe weren't necessarily in DC or at the Capitol at the time of the insurrection, but are members of that organization, right? They're trying to get them on conspiracy charges. And like I said, that can be a problem, right? Because I mean, think about women voting, right? Women's suffrage. Anybody who knew Susan B. Anthony was part of her circle, Susan B. Anthony voted illegally, right? She was charged. She was fined like $50. And she was a funny lady. She refused to pay the $50. Refused. Just adamantly. Because she said, if I pay the $50, then I'm legitimizing the process. So she refused to pay the $50. They never did anything really about it. Because like, I mean, she kind of made a statement. That's why people got really upset when Donald Trump pardoned her, because that legitimized the process, right? I mean, it's so petty, it's fucking stupid. But if you were involved with Susan B. Anthony and you knew she was going to go commit the crime of voting illegally, right? And you were like in agreement that you were going to help some hours, that you agreed that, yeah, we should go vote illegally. There's a problem there, right? Because are you breaking the law? Yes. Are you conspiring to break the law? Yes. But it's for civil liberties, right? It's different than a gang conspiring. You're conspiring to protect civil liberties or to expand civil liberties. And generally, we want groups to be able to do that, right? Like we want to progress and make sure that rights are protected. So it gets really hairy, right? This idea of conspiracy, because we can use it as a tool to basically stop people who disagree with us. It gets especially controversial when it comes to Rico. So Rico is the Racketeer Influences Corrupt Organizations Act. Like Congress, they try to make synonyms. Like they try to make like the bills that you call Rico, and they just the weirdest things. Racketeer Influences Corrupt Organization Act. Basically, what this does is this imposes penalties for, quote, all types of organized criminal behavior that is enterprise criminality, from simple political to sophisticated white-collar schemes to traditional mafia-style endeavors. So basically, Rico comes around as a way to stop the mafia, right? So the way the mafia works is people say the mafia doesn't exist today. It absolutely does. The crime family still exists. It was always hard to try to pin things on them because they would be engaged in legitimate business. And so, I'm trying to think which crime family was in New Jersey that basically had all the sanitation contracts, like they just ran the garbage trucks. But they would funnel money from their illegal activities through legitimate businesses, through legitimate corporations. They would launder money that way. And so it was really hard to pin anyone down. And if you got someone, right, if you got someone, they generally weren't going to roll over on anybody else. If they did roll, it'd be on some low-level person where they're not going to get shot or retaliated against, and along those lines. So because we had so much trouble prosecuting the mafia, we passed Rico. Again, designed to fight the mafia, but it since has grown out of control. And it creates brand new crimes. So often Rico is referred to as the crime of being criminal. The crime of being criminal, which sounds like a status offense, but it's Rico, we just look the other way. So Rico, most prosecuted crimes involve three elements, right? So the first element is you have to be conducting affairs of any enterprise. Now, how do we define an enterprise? Do we define it as a business, corporation, anything like that? No, we do not. An enterprise is defined as, quote, any human endeavor. So literally anything. Literally anything. If it is a human endeavor, I want to go get coffee. That's enough. Like anything. Anything. Doesn't have to just apply to organizations. Like I said, the whole point was to apply to like corrupt organizations. That's why we have enterprise listed the way we do. But enterprise has come to mean anything, right? Any human endeavor. So you have to prove that there was a human endeavor. And by means of patterns of racketeering activity, which is defined as two or more elements of a huge list of crimes. Most commonly, we charge mail fraud or wire fraud. Right? So if you use the Postal Service to further your activity, mail fraud. If you use the internet, telephone, fucking telegrams, wire fraud. Right? Those are the kind of most common. Because we can intercept those. We can listen in, we can get the evidence fairly easily on them. So if you engage in two or more criminal activities, and this whole long list of crimes, and it is a very long list of crimes, two or more, you met the second problem. And I love the third problem. That do continue for a period of time or threaten to continue for a period of time. Right? So let's say this. Let's say you and I are burning down houses or burning down buildings in downtown, right? Every Friday. We come to an agreement. Right? And like one week, I just call you and say, hey, are we on for this Friday? And you say, yep, and I hang up the phone. At that point, Rico is going to attack us, right? Because we are engaging in a human endeavor. The phone call is a human endeavor. The fact that we're going to burn down a building is a human endeavor, right? We're humans, and we're doing something. Human endeavor. 2 or more elements of a huge list of crimes, well, arson being one of them, and I called you to ask you if we're still on for Friday. Well, that's the second element, right? That's the second crime. That's wire fraud. And then to do or threaten to do for a period of time. So we've done it for a little while, or we're planning on doing it for a while. That's enough. We've met the elements of Rico. Now, what's the problem with meeting the elements of Rico? Well, under Rico, the federal rules of evidence are suspended, right? So all the things, all the protections against hearsay, all the protections against really like dirty evidence coming in or illegally obtained evidence coming in, that all goes away. There are no rules once we have Rico. Like we're charging under Rico, it all goes away. It also may result in what's called spillover guilt, right? And what it does is it allows governments to seize assets of entire companies. So this is why if you ever get, whenever you get your first apartment, I guarantee you that in the lease, it will say that you promise not to engage in any kind of criminal activity from or using the apartment or the apartment complex, including but not limited to the use and distribution of illegal narcotics, and so on and so forth, right? It's going to have some kind of statement basically saying, you're not going to use the apartment to commit crimes. Because under Rico, let's say you use your apartment to commit crimes, right? And the landlords have no idea, or maybe they have like some kind of clue or whatever, but they don't know what's going on, right? We bust you under Rico. Well, I can't just seize an apartment, but I can't seize an entire apartment complex. So Rico allows us to, you are dealing drugs out of your apartment. I, as the federal government or states acting under similar statutes, can come in and seize the entire apartment complex and then sell it at auction and pocket the money. That's problematic, right? That gives us incentive to do very bad things. That's why when we have the lease is trying to say, it's trying to kind of subvert Rico, I mean, like, look, they agreed not to do anything illegal. We didn't know they were doing anything illegal. Because when it comes to civil forfeiture, and that's what this is if you use something in the commission of a crime, the government can seize it. That's called civil forfeiture. Now, there has to be a court case dealing with the forfeiture. What's interesting about the court case is it's not against a person. My favorite court case name was, what was it? It was the state of Tennessee, no, United States versus $2,500 in a Ford Focus. That was the name of the case. So what basically the government does is government says that these assets, we're seizing them, right?
Here's some information.
Fuck off. So yeah, these assets we believe were used in the commission of the crime. Now here's the thing. The assets, this is a civil case, so you don't get a public defender, you don't get anybody to represent you. And the assets are presumed guilty. So you have to show somehow that the assets that the government wants to take were not used in the commission of a crime. Never happens. Right? The government, 99% of the time, gets what they want. So they can take the apartment complex because you were dealing drugs out of it. Right? You engaged in some kind of racketeering activity. The apartment complex was used in that commission of the crime, even though the people had no clue what you were doing. You still did it. We can use that forfeiture. So civil forfeiture is a really big problem. It also pressures guilty pleas because here's the fun fact. There is a $250,000 mandatory fine and a 25-year prison sentence for each offense committed in the pattern of offenses. Right? So let's say you're dealing drugs, and I deal it to 10 people. That's $2.5 million in fines and 250 years in prison. Rico don't fuck around. There's a great case on points in Alexander versus the United States. And one thing I'll say about Rico, it's true about conspiracies as well, but Rico, let's say we have A, B, C, and D. All right? So A is the kingpin. B is the lieutenant in the cartel that's in charge of distribution and enforcement. C is your just low-level drug dealer. And D is the person who's in possession, who purchases, right? So, as we know, right, this is going to be a chain. Under Rico, I can be charged with conspiracy with A, conspiracy with B, conspiracy with C, conspiracy with D. However, let's say someone unrelated, quasi-related, unrelated, A kills X, murders X. Right? B murders Y and murders Z. I get popped for possession. Under possession, I can get charged, or under Rico, I can get charged with conspiracy with A, conspiracy with B, conspiracy with C, in addition to possession. And then I can also get charged with any crimes that anybody else in the conspiracy committed. So guess what? I just bought pot. That's all I did. Now suddenly I have possession offense, conspiracy with A, conspiracy with B, conspiracy with C, and I am charged with the murders of X, Y, and Z. So anything that somebody does in the conspiracy under Rico, I can charge anybody else with any crime, even somewhat related to what I did. I just purchased pot. I didn't know A, didn't know B. I wasn't in their territorial beefs. I don't know why they killed Y. I don't know X. I don't know Y. I don't know Z. I don't know why they killed them. But suddenly, I'm on trial for murder. I bought pot. Right? Or I've been buying pot. Or I'm a low-level drug dealer. Right? I'm engaging in a human endeavor. I have to do at least 2 or more elements on this huge list of crimes, which I have. And if a drug dealer, like a low level, it's going to continue for a period of time. Anything that happens in the chain, I can be charged with. Right? So let's say that like A killed X, and X was A's girlfriend or whatever, and they found out that X was stealing some of the product. Well, because it was tangentially related, they stole some of the product to the fact that you are in possession of the product, you can be charged. This is why Rico sucks. Like, and Rico started out with a very good intent, but ended up in a very kind of, this is my editorial opinion, kind of a bad place, where it really does violate, I argue, the Constitution. I mean, just in the fact alone that it suspends the rules of evidence. So if police violate your rights, like they come in without a warrant or something along those lines, you're charged under Rico, it does not matter. Doesn't matter. Right, so usually we reserve Rico for really big things, like really big conspiracies, but Rico has been used on small level stuff before. And people have gone to prison for a very long time for not doing any crimes whatsoever, or being very, very, very tangentially involved with something. So it's a tool the government uses to pressure people to plead guilty, right? Because if suddenly you are in possession, I'm going to say, look, I'll drop the murder charges because you bought pot. I'll drop the murder charges if you plead guilty to possession and conspiracy with A, B, and C. Right? What are you going to do? Rico is a federal crime. That means the death penalty can come into play. So if I'm looking at the murders of X, Y, and Z because I bought pot, I'm looking down at the death penalty. And they say, we'll get the death penalty off the table, we'll get rid of the murders if you plead guilty to the possession and then you roll over on A, B, and C, or you roll over on whoever you know. What are you going to do? Risk the death chamber or be like, screw it, they did it, is this person, here's his address, go. And yeah, I'll plead guilty, I'm going to spend some time in jail, but at least I'm not getting a needle put into my arm. So that is what Rico. Then we finally just wrap up with solicitation. Solicitation is just the crime of trying to get somebody else to commit a crime, right? Usually on your behalf. So the actus reus are words commanding, urging, or encouraging a person to commit a crime. Now, statutes use many words when they're talking about the actus reus. Includes advises, commands, counsels, encourage, incites, entreats, importunes, that incites there twice. Yeah, incites, induces, instigates, procures, requests, solicits, or encourages. And the list goes on from there, right? Each statute listed differently. So we have solicitation, right? Words urging somebody to commit a crime. With the mens rea, the specific intent, right? The purpose to commit the crime. And then any attendant circumstances required by statute. Now, what's interesting is when former President Trump was impeached the second time for the insurrection, or inciting the insurrection, he was really impeached for a solicitation charge. And that's all he was impeached for. It was his speech in which he encouraged, or in the case, what they actually charged him with in Congress was inciting somebody to go commit a crime. Right? With the purpose, with the intent for them to actually go do it. You wanted them to go do it. That's all that's required for solicitation. Right? Like, that is it. So if you know me, you'll understand that I have a fierce hatred of hydro flasks. Now, if I say to someone, if you go steal, let's say, just picking it, Amanda's hydro flask, I'll give you 20 bucks. Go steal her hydro flask for me. Right? Those words alone, that was solicitation. Right? Whoever I'm speaking to doesn't have to necessarily agree. I mean, it's an attempted solicitation. But I have said, you know what, if you go do this, I'll reward you, or hey, you need to go do this. You know why? Because hydro flasks are killing polar bears. Like, whatever it is. And you go commit the crime. You go steal it. You commit theft. That's solicitation. right? We see solicitation in two other kind of categories, two real realms. Solicitation to commit murder. So again, this is where you hire somebody to commit murder on your behalf. Or solicitation, we see this in vice cases, so prostitution cases, right? Where you, whether it's the John or whether it's the prostitute, encouraging the other person to engage in sexual relations for money, which is the act, right, the crime, and your intent was to have them engage in sexual relations for the money. That's where we see solicitation. And good case on point, and you can see how far back it dates, is Connecticut v. Spillover, which is a 1923 case. That being said, next class we are going to look at defenses to criminal liability. Specifically, we're going to look at justification defenses. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know.